Okay, so business today, it's global, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're, prepping for some big strategy meeting or just trying to like keep up with what's happening in international business, or maybe you're just curious about how companies choose where to go next. Well, this deep dive, this is for you. We're going to be looking at a chapter from a leading international business textbook, all about selecting international markets. And get this, the textbook even has its own podcast. How about that? But no worries, we'll break it all down. No textbook required.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Choosing the right international markets. I mean, it can really make or break a company, right? We're talking about decisions that have huge ripple effects.
Okay, so let's say you're a company and you've got these big global ambitions. Where do you even start?
Oh, well, this chapter lays out two main paths, top down and bottom up. Top down is kind of like casting a wide net.
Right.
You start with a whole bunch of potential markets, and then you narrow it down based on things like attractiveness and risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely a more analytical approach for sure. Relies heavily on data, market research, all that. It's really a process of elimination.
Right, exactly. And then you got the bottom-up approach. That's more like dipping your toes in the water first. You start with just a few markets, maybe ones that are similar to your home market.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of expand gradually so you can minimize those growing pains, the ones that come with adapting to new environments.
Right. Yeah. It's more cautious. Focuses on learning and adapting as you go.
Now, before we get lost in the how, let's talk about the why for a second. Why do companies even go global in the first place? The textbook breaks it down into four main motives. So there's resource seeking, which is basically getting those essential ingredients for your business, right? We're talking raw materials, skilled labor, maybe even some cutting-edge technologies. Think about all those companies that set up shop in Silicon Valley just to tap into that tech talent pool.
Exactly. Yeah. Or a manufacturing company that sets up in a region that's known for specific raw materials that are crucial to their production process.
Right. Then there's market seeking, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. That's all about expanding your customer base and boosting sales by getting into new markets. Like imagine a company launching their product in a country with a rapidly growing middle class. Huge potential there.
Absolutely. Yeah. No question.
And then we've got efficiency seeking. This is where companies are looking to optimize their operations on a global scale, so they can trim costs.
Yeah.
Think about companies that shift their labor-intensive operations to countries with lower wages,
Yeah.
or companies that concentrate production in specific locations
Mm.
just to achieve economies of scale. Like those massive manufacturing hubs you see popping up all over the world.
Yeah. It's like playing a global game of chess. Strategically positioning your pieces for maximum efficiency.
Exactly. And finally, there's strategic asset seeking. This is all about gaining a competitive edge by acquiring knowledge, maybe snapping up a valuable brand or tapping into some unique expertise. The textbook uses a really interesting example here. The Tata Group. It's an Indian company that acquired several UK businesses like Jaguar Land Rover and Tetley Tea. They weren't just after the brands themselves. They wanted the know-how that came with them. It was a strategic move to boost their global brand management capabilities. Yeah. It's like leveling up your skills by learning from the best in the business. Exactly. Now let's get back to the how. Let's delve into those analytical tools that companies use, especially for that top-down approach. The chapter talks about these things called portfolio analyses, which honestly sound kind of intimidating, but you broke it down in a way that actually made sense to me. It's basically about assessing markets based on key factors, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you got it. Think of it like creating a scorecard for each potential market. But here's the thing: the factors on that scorecard they can vary. It depends on the company's goals, the industry they're in. It's not a one size fits all kind of deal.
Right. So customization is key. So what are some of the most common approaches that companies use when they're building these market scorecards?
Well, one approach is it focuses solely on those big picture macro environmental factors. We're talking GDP, population growth, levels of economic development, all those indicators that give you a sense of the overall health and potential of a market.
So it's like taking the economic pulse of a country before you decide to set up shop there. Makes sense. What are some of the other approaches?
Another approach, he goes a step further. It blends those macroeconomic factors with a measure of industry competitiveness. So they might look at things like market share concentration, using something called the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, or HHI. It's basically a way to gauge how much competition you're likely to face in that market.
So it's not just about finding a market with a booming economy. You also want to make sure you have a fighting chance against the existing players.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Got it. And then there's an approach that focuses on weighing opportunities against risks. They might use frameworks like the Robinson Country Intelligence Index, which factors in things like governance, economics, operational risk, even societal dynamics, to get a comprehensive picture of the overall business environment.
So it's like a risk assessment, factoring in all those potential pitfalls that could trip you up along the way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, I'm curious, how would a company choose which of these approaches is the best fit for them? It seems like it would really depend on their specific industry and their overall goals, right?
No, absolutely. Take the tech industry, for example. They might be more focused on factors like access to talent, or the regulatory environment for innovation and the potential for rapid market growth. So their scorecard might look very different from, say, a consumer goods company, which might prioritize factors like disposable income, distribution channels, and consumer preferences.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these different approaches play out in different industries. It's like each industry has its own unique set of rules for the game. Okay, so we've covered the top-down approach. Now let's flip the script and dive into that bottom-up approach. Starting with this idea of liabilities of foreignness. It sounds a bit ominous, doesn't it?
Right. It might sound intimidating, but it really just refers to the inherent disadvantages a company faces when they're operating in a foreign market. Think about it, you're the new kid on the block. You don't know the local customs, you might not speak the language fluently, and you're up against established players who have that home court advantage.
Right. So it's like trying to navigate a new city without a map or a guide. You're bound to make a few wrong turns along the way.
Exactly. And those wrong turns can be costly. These liabilities can stem from three main sources: uncertainty, discrimination, and complexity. Uncertainty comes from not knowing the ins and outs of the new market. You might misjudge consumer preferences, run into unexpected regulatory hurdles, or even struggle to find reliable local partners.
And I imagine discrimination could be a major hurdle for foreign companies. It could be anything from consumer bias towards local brands to actual policies that favor domestic companies. It's like playing on an uneven playing field.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a reality that many companies face. And then there's complexity. Imagine trying to manage a supply chain that spans multiple time zones and languages, or navigating cultural differences in communication and decision-making styles. It adds a whole new layer of difficulty to running a business.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare, but isn't that where the Uppsala model comes in? You mentioned this earlier, and it sounded like a more strategic approach to minimizing those liabilities of foreignness.
Exactly. The Uppsala model, which has evolved over time, it advocates for a more gradual approach to internationalization. It's about taking baby steps. Starting with markets that are culturally and geographically closer to home, and then expanding your reach as you gain experience and confidence.
So it's like slowly wading into the pool instead of diving headfirst into the deep end.
Precisely. It's about managing risk, learning from your experiences, and building a solid foundation for sustainable global growth.
Now you mentioned that companies need tools to analyze the distance between markets to figure out where to start with this gradual expansion. This brings us to another key concept from the chapter, the cage framework. It sounds a bit like something you'd use to trap a wild animal, but it's actually a pretty clever way to break down the different dimensions of distance.
It is, and those dimensions they tie directly back to those liabilities of foreignness we were just talking about.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's break down these cage dimensions and see how they play out in the real world.
All right, so we have four main cages to consider. The first is cultural distance, which encompasses things like language, values, norms, and even religious beliefs. Think about how these cultural nuances could could influence the way you market a product or manage a workforce. You can't just, copy and paste your strategy from one culture to another. You need to adapt to the local context.
Right, like trying to sell hamburgers in a country where beef is considered sacred. Probably not going to be a winning strategy.
Exactly. Then we have administrative and political distance, which looks at government policies, regulations, legal systems, and even historical ties between countries. Imagine navigating trade barriers, adapting to varying levels of government intervention, or even dealing with political instability. It can be a minefield for companies that aren't prepared.
So it's like understanding the political landscape before you plant your flag in a new territory. You don't want to end up in a trade war or get caught in the middle of a political upheaval.
Right. Next up, we have geographic distance,
Mm.
which is the most straightforward of the four. It's about the physical distance between markets, the quality of transportation infrastructure, and even things like climate differences.
So it's not just about how many miles apart two countries are. It's about how easy it is to move goods and people between them. And I imagine climate plays a big role, especially for industries like agriculture or tourism.
Absolutely. And finally, we have economic distance, which focuses on differences in things like consumer incomes, labor costs, and the availability of resources. Think about a company trying to sell luxury goods in a market with low average incomes. That's a significant economic distance to overcome.
Yeah, it's all about understanding the purchasing power and the overall economic landscape of your target market. You need to make sure your product or service is actually a good fit for their wallets.
Exactly, and the textbook actually provides some really helpful examples to illustrate how these different dimensions of distance play out in specific industries. For instance, products with high linguistic content like TV shows or books. They're heavily influenced by cultural distance. It's not just about translating the words. You need to adapt the humor, the references, the entire storytelling approach to resonate with a different cultural audience.
Right, like trying to translate a slapstick comedy routine across cultures.
Yeah.
The physical humor might translate, but the cultural references might fall flat.
Exactly. And on the other end of the spectrum, industries with high sunk costs, like infrastructure projects or large scale manufacturing, they're particularly sensitive to administrative and political distance. Imagine investing millions of dollars in a factory only to have the government change the regulations or impose new tariffs. That's a significant risk that companies need to carefully consider.
So understanding these different dimensions of distance is crucial for companies looking to expand internationally. But how do they move beyond simply recognizing these distances and actually use them to make strategic decisions? That's where those distance metrics come in, right?
You got it. We need to go beyond just saying, oh, these two countries are culturally different.
Sure.
We need to be able to quantify that difference to make informed decisions about market entry, product adaptation, and even things like pricing and distribution strategies.
So distance metrics are like those rulers or measuring tapes you'd use in a science experiment.
Yeah.
They help you get precise measurements of those intangible concepts like cultural distance or administrative distance.
Exactly. And there are a bunch of different metrics out there, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Two of the most commonly used ones are Euclidean distance, or ED, and the Kogut and Singh index, or K&S index. ED is like measuring the distance between 2 points on a map. It's straightforward and easy to calculate, but it doesn't take into account all those complexities we were talking about, like cultural nuances or political barriers.
So ED is like taking a shortcut.
Right.
But you might miss some important landmarks along the way.
Right. The K&S index, on the other hand, is a bit more sophisticated. It tries to account for those nuances by factoring in things like variance across different cultural dimensions or political systems. Think of it like using a GPS that takes into account traffic, road closures, and even construction zones to give you the most accurate estimate of your arrival time.
Okay, that makes sense. So the K&S index is like a more nuanced GPS for navigating the complexities of international markets.
Exactly, and the textbook uses a great example to illustrate how these metrics work in practice. They use the Hofstede cultural dimensions, which are a set of 6 values that describe how different cultures view things like power, individualism, uncertainty avoidance, and so on.
Right, right. I remember learning about those in my sociology class. It was fascinating to see how different cultures have such different perspectives on the world.
Exactly. So let's say you're trying to measure the cultural distance between the U.S. and China. You could look at how these two countries score on each of Hoste's dimensions, and then use a distance metric like ED or KNS to calculate the overall difference between them. That would give you a numerical representation of how culturally distant these two markets are.
So it's like turning those abstract cultural differences into concrete data points that companies can use to make informed decisions.
Precisely. And that's crucial because gut feelings and anecdotal evidence, they're often unreliable when it comes to international business. You need hard data and sophisticated analytical tools to navigate the complexities of the global marketplace.
Now all this talk about frameworks and metrics is great, but I'm always curious to see how these concepts play out in the real world. And the textbook actually provides a really interesting case study that I think will resonate with our listeners. The international market selection process of the Metro Group. It's a global retail giant. What caught my eye was their blended approach. They incorporate elements of both top-down and bottom-up strategies, which I think is a really smart way to balance data-driven analysis with real-world pragmatism.
Absolutely. They've managed to create a system that leverages the best of both worlds. It's a really fascinating process to break down.
I'm all for breaking it down. Walk us through how Metro Group approaches international market selection.
So they start with a wide net, considering all potential markets except those where they, already have a presence. They then use what they call knockout criteria to eliminate markets that don't meet certain thresholds for potential and competitive intensity. Factors like legal uncertainty, unfavorable tax regimes, or inconvertible currencies, those can lead to an early exit. They're not afraid to say no to a market that doesn't align with their strategic goals or risk tolerance.
So it's like weeding out the bad apples early on to avoid wasting time and resources on markets that are unlikely to pan out.
Exactly. And for the markets that make it through this initial screening, they employ a scoring model based on macroeconomic data. They're prioritizing market-seeking motives, heavily weighting factors like GDP per capita, private consumer spending, and population size. They're looking for markets with a solid economic foundation and a growing consumer base.
So it's about finding those sweet spots where economic growth and consumer demand are both on the rise.
Right, but it doesn't start there. They also adjust this preliminary ranking based on four crucial aspects. First, they look for gaps in their existing portfolio, seeking to expand into regions that offer diversification or strategic advantages. They want to avoid putting all their eggs in one basket and ensure they have a balanced global presence.
So it's like a portfolio manager diversifying their investments to minimize risk and maximize returns.
Exactly. Second, they analyze potential synergies, prioritizing markets that can be served efficiently from existing operations in neighboring countries. They're looking for ways to leverage their existing infrastructure and expertise to reduce costs and streamline their operations.
Yeah, it's like maximizing efficiency by creating regional hubs and minimizing those cross-border headaches.
Exactly. Third, they consider trade-offs, recognizing that limited investment capital might mean prioritizing certain markets over others. This involves weighing the potential first-mover advantages, like establishing brand loyalty or setting industry standards, against the risks of entering an immature market. It's a calculated gamble, balancing potential rewards with potential pitfalls.
So it's like deciding whether to be the first one to jump on a new trend or to wait and see how it plays out before diving in.
Exactly. And finally, they factor in provisional risks like political instability or economic downturns to get a more complete picture. They're not just looking at the current state of the market. They're trying to anticipate potential challenges and factor those into their decision making.
So it's about having a plan B. Being prepared for those unexpected twists and turns that inevitably come with doing business in a complex and ever-changing world.
Absolutely. And even after all this analysis, they don't just jump in head first. They conduct in-depth feasibility studies for their top-ranked markets, involving, extensive research, site visits, and collaboration with internal and external experts. They even have a dedicated team that develops detailed business plans, outlining everything from the number and location of stores to potential risks and expected returns on investment. It's a thorough and meticulous process that leaves no stone unturned.
It sounds incredibly comprehensive. It's clear that they don't leave anything to chance. They want to be as prepared as possible before making that final leap into a new market.
Exactly. And I think that's a valuable lesson for anyone looking to expand their business internationally. You can't just rely on gut instinct or anecdotal evidence. You need to have a solid framework, a data-driven approach, and a willingness to adapt as you go.
I love how this case study brings all those abstract concepts we discussed earlier to life. It shows how companies can actually use these frameworks and metrics to make strategic decisions that drive real world success. And speaking of driving success, the chapter also provides a practical tool set for developing a personalized international market selection, or IMS, process. Are you ready to equip our listeners with the tools they need to craft their own global expansion strategies?
Absolutely. Let's empower our listeners to become international market selection masters.
All right, let's dive into that tool set and help our listeners take their global ambitions to the next level.
It's all about customization. It's a framework, not like a rigid formula or anything. So the first step is, define your internationalization motives. What are you hoping to achieve by expanding globally? Are you seeking resources, new markets, greater efficiency, strategic assets, or maybe a mix of all of these? Once you've clarified your goals, then you can start identifying those key selection criteria. Remember, it's about considering both opportunities and risks.
Right. So it's not just about chasing those, shiny, fastest growing markets. It's about aligning your international expansion with your overall business strategy. So we're talking about playing the long game here.
Absolutely. And these criteria, they'll vary depending on your industry, your business model, even your company culture. What might be a critical success factor for a tech startup could be completely irrelevant for a manufacturing giant.
Yeah, this is where all that brainstorming and open discussion comes in handy, right? It's about digging deep, understanding your company's strengths and weaknesses, and identifying those factors that'll truly make or break your success in a new market.
You nailed it. Once you've got your list of criteria, then it's time to prioritize. Which factors are non-negotiable, which ones are nice to haves, but not deal breakers. This is where you might set those knockout levels, eliminating markets that don't meet your minimum requirements.
Yeah, it's like having a checklist for potential markets, right? And if a market doesn't kick all the essential boxes, it's off the list, no matter how tempting it might seem on the surface.
Exactly. And remember, this prioritization should be guided by your internationalization motives and your overall risk appetite. A risk-averse company might place a heavier weight on factors like political stability or regulatory predictability. On the other hand, a company with a more aggressive growth strategy, they might prioritize market growth potential or access to cutting-edge technology. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's about aligning your market selection process with your company's DNA.
So it's not just about what the data tells you. It's about how you interpret that data through the lens of your company's specific goals and constraints. It's like having a filter that helps you separate the signal from the noise.
I love that analogy. Once you've prioritized your criteria, the next step is to rate the remaining countries, using those criteria. The challenge here is that your indicators might be measured in different units. You might have GDP figures in dollars, population numbers in millions, and regulatory quality scores on a scale of 1 to 10. Trying to compare those directly, it's like comparing apples to oranges. To make meaningful comparisons, you need to standardize these values, typically using a common scale.
This is where things get a bit more technical, right? It's like translating everything into a universal language,
Yeah.
so you can actually compare those apples to apples, or in this case, markets to markets. How do companies go about doing this? It sounds pretty complex.
It's simpler than you might think. A common approach is to convert all those values to a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 representing, low opportunities, high risks, or significant distances, and 10 representing, the opposite. The textbook provides a really clear example of how to calculate these standardized scores using intervals and minimum and maximum values for each indicator. Don't worry, you don't need to be a math whiz to figure it out.
Well, that's a release, but I think it's still important to understand this step because it highlights how companies can turn raw data into actionable insights. It's not enough to just collect the information.
Right.
You need to process it in a way that allows for meaningful comparisons and informed decision making. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of numbers floating around in a spreadsheet.
Absolutely. It's about turning data into a decision-making tool. And once you've standardized your scores, you can move on to the final stage of the scoring process. Weighting and aggregating those scores to create an overall country ranking. This involves assigning weights to your different criteria based on their relative importance. For example, if market size is your top priority, you might give it a weight of, say, 40%, while factors like cultural distance or ease of doing business might receive lower weights.
So it's like creating a custom formula for success, right?
Yes.
Tailored to your company's unique priorities and goals, kind of like baking a cake,
Yeah.
where the ingredients are your selection criteria, and the weights are the proportions you use for each ingredient.
I love that. You're a natural at this, and the output of this whole process, a short list of the most promising markets ranked based on their weighted scores. But remember, this short list is just a starting point. It's a guide for the research, due diligence, and ultimately a more nuanced understanding of each market's opportunities and challenges.
Okay, so we've gone from casting a wide net to narrowing down our options to a select group of contenders. What happens next? How do we move from a short list to actually making that leap into a new market? What are the next steps on this global expansion journey?
That's where the real work begins. The shortlist provides a framework, but it's crucial to delve deeper into each market. This might involve, conducting market research, visiting potential locations, meeting with local partners, and gathering firsthand information on everything from consumer preferences to regulatory hurdles. It's about validating those initial assumptions and gaining a more granular understanding of the market's nuances. Remember Metro Group's multi-stage feasibility study process. They didn't just rely on data points. They sent teams of experts to assess the markets on the ground, to gather insights from local stakeholders, and to build a comprehensive picture of the opportunities and challenges ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot more than just crunching numbers and building spreadsheets. It's about getting out there, talking to people, and experiencing the market firsthand. Almost like detective work, right? You have your initial clues, your leads, but you need to go out there and gather more evidence, talk to witnesses, and piece together a complete story before you can crack the case.
You're spot on, and just like a good detective, you need to be prepared to adapt your approach as you uncover new information. You might discover hidden risks, untapped opportunities, or unexpected complexities that weren't apparent in your initial analysis. Flexibility is key.
So it's an iterative process, right? Constantly refining your understanding and adjusting your strategy based on new insights and evolving circumstances. This brings us back to the importance of flexibility and adaptability in international market selection.
Yeah.
The ability to pivot and adjust your course is crucial in this game.
Absolutely. And remember, the markets themselves are constantly changing, so your approach needs to be dynamic as well. You can't just set a strategy in stone and expect it to work flawlessly. 5 years down the line, you need to be agile, responsive, and always willing to learn and adapt.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered so much ground, from the high level motives behind internationalization to the nitty-gritty details of distance metrics and scoring models. I'm starting to feel like an international market selection pro
You're well on your way. And remember, this journey is about more than just finding the right markets. It's about building a sustainable and successful global presence. It's about creating value, building relationships, and making a positive impact on the world.
So it's not just about, planting your flag in a new territory. It's
Yeah.
about cultivating that territory, understanding its nuances and building lasting relationships with local stakeholders. It's about becoming a part of the global community, not just a player in the global market.
Exactly. And that requires a deep understanding of the market, a willingness to adapt, and a commitment to long-term growth. It's about thinking globally and acting locally.
This has been fantastic. Thank you for sharing your expertise and for making this complex topic so accessible. I'm sure our listeners are feeling much more equipped to tackle their own international market selection challenges. But before we wrap up, I have one final question that I'd love to get your perspective on. We've talked about the advantages of being a first mover, but the textbook also hints at the potential downsides. So my question is this: is it always better to be first to market, or can there be like strategic advantages to being a fast follower? Observing the pioneers, learning from their mistakes. I'm really curious about the trade-offs between early entry and a more calculated wait and see approach. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, that's a great question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. It's like asking, if it's better to be the adventurous explorer or the savvy map maker. Both have their strengths and their challenges. First mover advantage can be incredibly powerful. You get to establish brand recognition, build those early relationships with key stakeholders. You can even shape the competitive landscape to your advantage.
Yeah, it's like being the first one to stake your claim in a gold rush, right?
Right. Yeah.
You get the prime real estate before everyone else catches on.
Exactly. But here's the catch. There are also risks associated with being the first one through the door. You're essentially venturing into uncharted territory.
Yeah.
You face higher uncertainty, you could encounter unforeseen challenges. It's like being the first to explore a dense jungle. You might discover amazing things, but you're also more likely to run into danger.
So it's a high risk, high reward scenario. You have the potential to strike gold, but you also might end up lost in the wilderness.
Right, and that's where the concept of a fast follower comes in. Think of it like being the map maker who studies the explorer's journey, learns from their successes and failures, and then charts a safer, more efficient route by observing the first movers, learning from their missteps. A fast follower can potentially mitigate some of those risks. They can refine the product or service based on market feedback, adapt their strategy to avoid the pitfalls encountered by the pioneers, and even leverage the infrastructure or market awareness that the first movers have already established.
So it's like learning from the mistakes of others,
Right.
right? Avoiding those costly wrong turns and entering the market with a more refined, battle-tested approach. You let the first movers clear the path, and then you swoop in with a better, smarter solution.
Exactly.
Right.
And sometimes those initial missteps by the first movers, they can create like golden opportunities for the fast followers. Imagine a scenario where a first mover launches a product that's too complex or too expensive for the target market. A fast follower could seize that opportunity by offering a simpler, more affordable alternative,
Yeah.
capturing market share from the incumbent. It's like watching a competitor trip over their own shoelaces and then capitalizing on their stumble.
It's almost like the tortoise and the hare, right? The first mover might sprint ahead, but the fast follower can take a more measured approach, learning from the hare's mistakes,
Yeah.
and ultimately crossing the finish line first.
That's a perfect analogy. Ultimately, the decision of whether to be, a first mover or a fast follower, it depends on a variety of factors, including, the industry, the company's risk tolerance, the availability of resources, and the competitive dynamics of the market. There's no one size fits all answer. It's about assessing the situation, weighing the pros and cons, and making the strategic choice that aligns best with your company's goals and capabilities.
So it's not just about choosing the right market. It's about choosing the right time to enter that market. And that requires careful analysis, strategic thinking, and a deep understanding of your company's, strengths and weaknesses.
Precisely. International market selection is a dynamic and complex process, but with the right frameworks, a thoughtful approach, and a willingness to adapt, companies can they can navigate the challenges and unlock the incredible opportunities of global expansion.
Well, this deep dive has been fantastic. It's been a whirlwind tour of international market selection, and I feel like I've gained valuable insights that I can apply to my own work, and even just to my understanding of the global business landscape. I hope our listeners feel the same way. So until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of your knowledge. This is the deep dive. Signing off.